Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Preservation School about parapet inspections. Our upcoming events include the Young Preservationist Party and Kressler Award presentations on February 4th, a West Village walking tour on February 12th, and the launch of the Sixth Celebrate Garifuna brochure on March 24th. Information about all of our upcoming programming can be found on our website, hdc.org. If you have any questions, you can email me at marbulu@hdc.org. Today's class is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel for free viewing. You may also watch all of our previous Preservation School classes, virtual tours, and conference panels on our YouTube channel. I would like to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council, and the New York State Council on the Arts for supporting Preservation School. If you would like to receive credit, please send me your AIA number. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and they'll be addressed at the end. Now I'll hand it over to Matthew Jenkins to lead today's tour. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Matthew Jenkins. I run a small facade repair, preservation, exterior restoration firm in the city. And so parapets are now become one of my things that I focus a lot on. I want to give just a kind of a heads up that this is going to be kind of an introduction to what a parapet is too. So it might be too basic for some of you, but I really wanted to start kind of at the very beginning. So what is the reason for a parapet report? Why did the DOB decide all of a sudden, a year and a half, 2 years ago, to start doing these? And it's because of safety. So the actual terminology is structural stability, meaning the parapet must be maintained in a safe condition. And what does that really mean? It means that things shouldn't be falling off of your parapet. Your parapet shouldn't be in danger of collapsing or, falling onto somebody. And so that is the reason. It makes sense, right? The DOB's focus, Department of Buildings focus, is on safety, right? So this is what the parapet report's for. Now, there is a crossover into something called Facade Inspection Safety Program. This is called FISP, or Local Law 11. This is for inspections required at buildings over 6 stories. It's submitted every 5 years to the DOB. You need a licensed architect and engineer. This is complete, it's a crossover, but it is not the same report as a parapet report, just to make that clear. Over 6 stories, meaning if your building is below 6 stories, it's not part of this inspection, the facade inspection. That is why this parapet report is essentially for all buildings. It doesn't matter if it's below 6 floors or above 6 floors. So this started January 2024. Where every owner must have an observation of the parapet performed in accordance with the rules. That you can see where it got distributed in November, right before January 1st, 2024. And so this is pretty much the new rules, right? This is the new thing, the latest DOB kind of direction for all buildings. So, like I said, I apologize. I want to start at the very beginning. What is a parapet? So Webster's definition is a wall, rampart, or elevation of earth of stone to protect soldiers. And I just love that idea that a parapet is actually something from a castle to protect soldiers during wars. It's a low wall or railing edge of a platform or roof, also called a parapet wall. So going back to the very basics of parapets. So what is a parapet and what does it do? So a parapet is an exterior wall that rises up vertically past the roof line. Typically, it will be on flat roofs. And if someone were to say, well, why? Why are they there? Well, they do a few things. They increase the height of the building to keep people safe from falling off of their roof. But they also, because architects are always going to be architects, they become a design element for the building. People can put cornices on them. They can make a decorative parapet like this, where they have cast stone, different colors, and terracotta pieces. Also, parapets can rise up to hide mechanical equipment. They give privacy to roof level apartments too sometimes. So this is just kind of like really basic parapet, terminology. So where is your parapet on your building? So There is some confusion, believe it or not, about this, and I totally understand because it's all about the strict definition as the DOB, what they call a parapet. So most parapets, if you go to the roof of your building or to a bulkhead of your building or to a terrace of your building, you will see a wall that rises up past. What that is that's your parapet. That is an exterior wall that rises up past the roof level. Now, like I said, there's a lot of confusion about do you have a parapet or not? And I'm going to go into detail on that. But this is where you'll typically find parapets. So the next question, do you absolutely have to have your parapets inspected? So there are 4 basic rules on this. The requirement applies to all buildings, and the DOB has laid this out very simply, 4 topics. They say parapets that are fronting the right of way, I'll get into that in a minute, regardless of height. That means the building can be 1 story, 20 stories, regardless of height. And then there's a few exceptions, which I'll get into some more details too, essentially except for detached 1 and 2 family homes, which means if you have a detached 1 or 2 family home, and I'll explain detached, you don't have to do this. Also, the exception is if the building has a fence or other barrier preventing access to the exterior wall. So I'm going to talk about fronting the right of way first. So the DOB's definition, Department of Buildings definition of a right of way is the public right of way, the public street space beyond the private property line, including the roadway sidewalk. So that means the sidewalk, the street, anything that the public can be near your building, essentially, that is the right of way. And so one of the things about the right of way is that, and this is the definitions from the DOB here, basically says if an elevation of the exterior wall is next to or part of the public right of way, and if a member of the public who's not associated with the property can walk up to that facade, that is where it matters because something could fall and hurt somebody. And so they're very specific about this. Now, one of the questions that I get a lot is, are parapets over an adjoining property, rear or side yard, occupied by somebody else, basically your neighbor? Are they subject to an inspection? Because you don't own the property next to you, right? That's usually the backyard of a neighbor. This says, at a minimum, parapets fronting the right of way should be inspected. Other parapets may be inspected at the inspector's discretion. So what does that mean? If I'm on a roof inspecting a parapet and I'm looking at the parapet that's over the right of way, and then 5 feet to my right is another parapet that's not over the right of way, because I'm there, I'm still going to inspect it, right? It makes sense. Like, why would you not do that? So, but the report is simple. It basically tells you the right of way is what's important. Now, I feel I don't want to ignore other parapets on the building, because once you're up there, you might as well inspect it all. But I just wanted to tell you this is what the actual written word is here. Now, regardless of heights, I know this is probably the most confusing thing. Like we talked about before, Local Law 11 or FISP is over 6 stories. This is any height. If you have a 1-story building, you have to have it inspected. If you have 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories, this is basically every building, essentially, right? And so that's one thing I want to get across. If you have a 1-story retail shop in Queens, and it's 1 floor, and there's a roof right above the first floor, and it has a parapet, it needs to be inspected. Now, for the exceptions, except for detached 1 or 2 family homes. And the DOB has supplied photos to make this even clearer to talk about these exceptions. This is the image that they show. So the image on the left says this is a detached 1 or 2 family home. It is a standalone building. It's not connected to the neighbors, and it's not more than 2 families, so it's not 3 family. It's a 1 or 2 family home. It is exempt from the parapet inspections. However, almost that same building on that image on the right is a 2-family home, but it is attached to the neighbor. That means it is subject to the parapet inspection. So that said, if you have a townhouse or a brownstone that is connected to the neighbor, it is attached. even if it's a single family home. So I just wanted to show you that's one of the images the DOB uses. Now, in my mind, a detached single family home is something like this in a neighborhood far out Brooklyn, right? Where it's like an individual house, like in a suburb, right? That's also a detached single family home. All right, next exception. Except for buildings with a fence or other barrier preventing access to the exterior wall. So the DOB supplied this image, all right? So this is an odd kind of sketch here, but what this is, it's showing a building in section or an elevation. The grade is at the bottom, and essentially there is a small fence between the public right-of-way and the building. And there is actually a calculation you can do. If that space B is less than the height compared to the width, it's the saying that this is what they're saying, that basically if you do not have access into this space, the public, then you're exempt. But this all about height, right? So it's all about this height here, and there is a calculation. So here's the thing. When I have clients call me to ask, do I need to have it inspected? I'm going to kind of err on the side of caution, right? I'm going to say, you know what, I can do the math, but I feel like it's something you should be paying attention to. The last thing you want is for the parapet to fall on someone's head that belongs to the building, right? So the idea is that this is just one of the exceptions the DOB has. Now, I want to talk about another exception that I have seen that is, oh, sorry, I'm going to go back to this one. So this is another image the DOB had. So this is an image they issued. The building on the left, which is building A, is behind a private fence. And they're saying that essentially that is set back from the public right-of-way. So therefore, that is exempt. However, building B on the right is closer to the sidewalk, and essentially that parapet is over the public right-of-way, and that one does not meet the exemption. Now, what I see a lot when I go to roofs, I get to a roof to do an inspection, and I see permanent plantings, trees, furniture, all kinds of things in front. So this, in my mind, this is also, I can't really see the inside of the parapet here. So what does that mean? It means that I'm going to be stuck on the outside of the building trying to use binoculars and other visual tools to zoom in on that parapet. That's that same parapet right here. That's that parapet. And you can see all the trees and everything on it. So I'm stuck doing what I can to document what's the outside of that parapet because I'm able to see it from the outside only. Right now, the DOB has made it clear. It says, what happens if I cannot see the outside of that parapet due to building geometry? So this is a little different. Basically says, is it acceptable to physically inspect it from the inside? And this is saying yes. Essentially, fire escapes, balconies, anything I can do to get access, neighboring roofs, the backyard, side yard, any kind of thing that I can see to actually determine the status of that parapet. So like this is pretty bad, right? I mean, you cannot see through the parapet at all here, right? This is completely trees. There's a grill here with a permanent furniture. So, this is what happens sometimes. So, I'm stuck doing everything I can to inspect the rest of it. Now, do you absolutely have to have your parapet inspected? And the answer is yes. Essentially means it's pretty much all buildings in the entire city that have parapets at least, okay? Now, one of the big questions I have are people that don't even know if they have a parapet. So I just want to go through this again. It's a continuous extension of the exterior wall rising above the roof. So you could have a parapet that has a handrail on top. You can have a parapet, an even lower parapet that has a handrail on top, or you can have a solid parapet of any kind of masonry around the building. You can see the shadow lines of the parapet all throughout this building. So just know that not all buildings do have parapets. Now, one of the big questions I get is townhouses and brownstones. And very few brownstones and townhouses have parapets, but I'll show you the ones that do. So there's a lot of, and I'll talk about this in a minute, there's a lot of companies out there that will try to coerce you into inspecting parapets when you don't even have any. So that's why another reason I really wanted to get these points across. So this is a neighborhood in Brooklyn. It is a row of townhouses. The backs of every one of these buildings on the roof here, the roof's pitched down to a gutter, which means they pitch down and there's a gutter. So there is no raised wall at the back of this building. The front of the building actually has cornices, and I'll talk about cornices in a minute. But I wanted to show you just real quick in this one image, the only parapet in this image is at the very end of the block. Essentially, it is right here. That is the only parapet in this image. It is an end wall over the sidewalk, and that is the only parapet now. All the rest of those are cornices, and the very back are gutters. So I'm going to go into more detail on that. So do cornices need to be inspected? So the way the DOB, Department of Buildings, has laid this out, cornices attached to the front wall or roof with a parapet behind do not need to be inspected. However, cornices attached to parapet walls are required. So a lot of townhouses and brownstones, when you go up to the roof, will have towards the front of the building a sloped, this is like the slope here, where it pitches up to show where the cornice actually is. It's usually above the roof. And essentially the DOB is saying, if your cornice, your decorative cornice at the front of your building, basically this right here, is completely covering the parapet or any kind of parapet there is. The roof itself pitches up like this, and you cannot see the parapet. It is basically exempt. Now, that said, I have seen parapets in New York City that look like this, and this is required to be inspected. This is a cornice that is attached, but you could see the backside of the parapet here. Now, like I said, this is still kind of all up to the inspector too. I'm just telling you what the Department of Buildings has decided to require, what has to be inspected. Okay, so like I said, I see this situation and I see this situation on the left here. So where you cannot even see any bit of the parapet at all because it's all buried below the roof and it's all behind the cornice. So it is completely up to the inspector to make these decisions where they will decide what to inspect. However, I just wanted to give you the actual code. So if you have a cornice and you can see the back of the parapet, which is exposed, then that is definitely 100% required to be inspected. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, parapets can be pretty much any height. There are requirements for newer buildings, but when you go on your roof, you might see this is an actual 7-inch parapet on the right side here with a handrail on top. Here's a taller parapet with a handrail on the face of the parapet. Traditionally, parapets, they have changed rules through the years. Newer buildings and altered buildings, this distance must be typically 42 inches above the roof surface. Now, like I said, there are some buildings that aren't going to have that, and it's fine. But the idea is that there is no specific height that you're going to see your parapet at. Some older parapets could be 36 inches tall. Some could be 24 inches tall. Some can be even shorter. Some have handrails. So this is why every parapet is going to be different. And I can tell you about new buildings, about how tall they're supposed to be, but on old buildings, you're going to find all kinds of things. So that's why it's important to understand that this is a parapet. This is a small parapet. It's about 7 inches tall, and then there's a handrail on top of that. So just know that this is typical of New York City. You're going to find all these different types of parapets in New York. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is it possible to have handrails and not have parapets? And yes, it is. You can have a flat roof that pitches to a gutter just like this, and you have no parapet at all. There's no parapet rising up here. There's no parapet, rising up high. It is essentially purely just a function of the handrail doing the protection. So that said, not all buildings have parapets. And that's why it's important to have an inspector that you trust come look and tell you if you have one or not. I'm going to tell you something really frustrating in a minute. So what materials can parapets be? So I'm going to show you lots of images here. They can be pretty much anything. They can be clad in brick, stone, terracotta, concrete masonry unit, a CMU, sheet metal, stucco. So here's a stucco parapet that's been painted with this sheet metal cap, just to show you an example. Here's one that's a CMU, a concrete masonry unit that's been painted with a metal cap. Here's one where the roof membrane of the roof actually wraps over the parapet. So I get this question a lot too. How do you inspect this? Well, I mean, primarily I'm going to be looking at it from the outside and trying to see if this has shifted or moved at all. But clearly someone has completely covered their parapet on the inside. So I can't tell even what it's made of, right? So, but this is a parapet that I know is stone and brick from the outside, but the inside is covered in roofing. Let's see, here's another stucco parapet, but this one has terracotta camelback copings on top. Here's a brick parapet on a newer building that has sheet metal copings on top. Here's a older building that has a new roof with a low parapet with a new handrail on the face of it. So, you know, that's why I'm saying there is no exact similar parapet for everyone. Everyone's going to have something different. And remember when I mentioned the architects are going to, on fancier buildings, they're going to design their parapet. This is a terracotta parapet with brick infill, with a handrail, a custom handrail. So this is a 1940s building, and this is typical. It's a low parapet in some places and a higher parapet in someplace else. So, you know, as I said, you never know what you're going to find when you go upstairs. Here's a parapet. This is on, I can't remember if it's the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, but this was a tall building that clad its parapets in sheet metal. Makes the parapet inspection a little more difficult, right? Because everything is covered. So I don't know why this happened. If it was leaks, most likely it was leaks. I don't know if they did this because something was wrong, but this is something that I usually don't recommend that, you know, clients do this. But this was a temporary fix to cover something. Like I said, most likely a leak. Here's another decorative parapet. This is Upper West Side. And this is it's got curved terracotta shapes and details on it, decorative elements, right? This is an architect doing what architects do, right? Designing something really interesting with your parapet. It's still a safety thing. And you can see here on the side, this also has handrails that attach up. So like I said, you never know what you're going to find when you're looking at an actual parapet. Now, here's the thing that I think most people are confused about with the parapet inspection. So the FISP or local law report, remember it's above 6 stories, you are required to engage a licensed architect or a licensed engineer to inspect and submit, right? It's every 5 years now. I think that's going to change in the future. That is required for FISP or local law reports. Here's the most shocking thing about the parapets. For yearly parapet reports, you need one of these things: a super, handyman, a mason, a contractor, a person in a similar construction trade, an architect, right? An engineer, an insurance inspector, a New York State inspector, or any individual capable of identifying hazards on the parapet. That leaves this wide open. So I've had clients ask me, hey, I know a little bit about construction. Could I inspect the parapet? And I say, yes. Yes, you can. That is the oddest thing about this inspection. I don't know why the Department of Buildings decided that, but it makes it easier, right? You need one of these things. Now, here's the thing, and I think it's a little frustrating. I have seen on websites of architects and engineers in New York City that they'll write out on their website that you're required to have a licensed architect or engineer do your parapet reports. Is it smart to have a licensed architect or engineer? Sure. I mean, clearly they're probably going to know a little more than a super, a little more than an inspector or a contractor. However, you do not have to have that person. Now, that said, pretty much any building that I'm currently working on or have, you know, in my collection of projects, most often I would be asked to do the inspection. Even though I'm a licensed architect, they don't need me to do it, but because I'm already there at the building doing something else, that makes sense, right? It makes total sense to have someone like that. But I tell people, you don't have to do that. I had a super recently that wanted to do it, and he wanted to do it for the client, his boss essentially. And he spent a while working on Microsoft Word, trying to lay out photos, and just got frustrated. So I understand that too. Sometimes it's just easier to have someone else do it. But that's one thing I really want to get across is that unlike FISP or Local Law 11, you do not need a licensed person to do these inspections. Now, like I said, if you have a licensed person working on the building already, you might as well have them do it. Or if you trust, you have someone that you've worked with in the past, maybe it's smart to have someone like that do it. That's the way I get a lot of these jobs. Okay. Now, all throughout Brooklyn and Queens, there are random flyers from random companies going up on doorknobs and front doors. And they have all kinds of red, bold type that say if you could face fines, you could ignore, if you ignore things, you're going to be fined. Here's the thing. There's a lot of companies that can do this. And like I said, it makes sense. You're going to have companies out there that do this, right? Anyone can do this pretty much, right? And you saw that list. That's the list, right? Pretty much anyone can do this. Similar construction trade, any individual capable of identifying hazards. So this is the saddest thing. I've heard clients tell me that they paid someone to do their parapet inspection, not me, they paid someone, and they turned out they didn't even have a parapet. So I just want to get across that there's a lot of fear especially in neighborhoods in Brooklyn where you've got rows and rows of brownstones and townhouses, and they may or may not have parapets, right? So that's why I think it's important to find someone you trust. If it's your super, if it's a contractor, if it's a architect or engineer you trust, right? I feel like that's the best bet is to go with that. But there is a lot of kind of false things out there. So that's why I really wanted to get this across. Now, what is this parapet inspection, and how do I submit this report, or how does any inspector submit this report, right? So, it's just like any report where anyone's doing an inspection. It's about figuring out what's going on with the building, right? To keep the building safe. So this is the other strange thing about the parapet inspection. You do not submit this to the Department of Buildings. It is not submitted in any way, shape, or form to the Department of Buildings. And I know that sounds strange because I just talked about Local Law 11 or FISP, which is submitted every 5 years by a licensed person. This one is not submitted. And what this means is that this is the Department of Buildings wanting you to almost kind of self-police your own buildings. Now I'm going to give you an example. So I recently, this is about 6 months ago, I went to a building and I climbed up to the roof. It was a brownstone townhouse type building, and it did have one parapet. And the owner came up there with me, and he said, "Oh, wow, I haven't been on this roof in 25 years." And he owned this building. He's never been on the roof. And so in my mind, that's where it kind of connected the dots. I was like, okay, this report is really to get owners of buildings to start paying more attention. If a building is not subject to the FISP or Local Law 11 report over 6 stories, right, then chances are maybe you haven't paid as much attention as you should to your parapet, right? So that's why I think that is what this is about. No submission to the Department of Buildings is required. So what happens? A report is supplied to the owner. It could be a PDF, it could be a printed report, and the owner must maintain these reports for 6 years, which means you're going to have a folder someplace or something on your computer to store these reports. Every year, someone's going to do this report, and you're just going to store them. And after the 7th year, you can get rid of the first one and hold on to, you're going to always have 6 essentially, right? Until we get to 6 years. So this is all this is. The idea of this is that the Department of Buildings could feasibly stop by, knock on your door and say, "Can I see your report?" Most often they will probably do that if they see issues, right? If they see something just walking down the street or someone reported something. So that is why this is important to have these done. You don't want to be caught without this, right? If the Department of Buildings comes by, or the inspector, they look like police officers, right? They got the badge and they've got the outfit, the little Prius car, like they are going to give you problems if you do not have these. So you must maintain these for 6 years, okay? Now, someone has to do this report yearly, and in the Department of Buildings definitions, just like everyone else, 1 year is January 1 to December 31st. Once a year, someone has to do this report. And if you say, well, why is that? Well, because New York City, as much as I love it and as much as I get work here, it is terrible, this climate for construction. It is terrible. It does damage to brick, mortar, masonry, all kinds, buildings get through a lot of abuse here. We have freeze-thaw cycles. We've got salty air. We've got rain. We've got sleet. We've got snow. Buildings take a lot of abuse in New York City. And so your parapet might be fine 1 year, and the next year it might not be. So cracks happen, things move, things shift. Water gets into your brick and mortar, freezes and expands like an ice cube, right, on an ice cube tray. So that's why this has to be done every year. Now, the DOB also has another out for some parts of the building. I think I might recommend, if I'm in a building, I would still want to inspect their balcony parapets. But believe it or not, the DOB is given out for balconies. So on this right image here, we have a balcony up here, and the parapet, the exterior wall rises up past the floor of that balcony. And in the DOB's definition, balcony walls are not considered parapets. Now, like I said, this is at the discretion of the inspector, but if I'm at this building and I'm climbing up on this roof to do something up here, I might want to inspect this. I just one of those things that I would feel better about. But just so you know, by definition, balcony walls are not considered parapets in the Department of Buildings world. Let me see. Another thing that doesn't fit a parapet definition is a terrace like this. So if you have a newer building or even an older building that has maybe glass handrails or wire handrails, they do not fit the definition of a parapet or required in a parapet inspection. Now, what is the parapet inspection? Like what do you actually have to do? So the word is very simple. The observation must include close-up inspections of the parapet, which means your inspector is going to be trying to get as close as they can to the outside and the inside of every parapet wall. It can be done from a fire escape or a roof. So I lean over a lot of parapets, needless to say, right, when I'm looking at both sides. I want to go through the observation must include these 3 points. I'm only going to call out a few of these, but the determination if the parapet is plumb, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then it goes into all the things that I typically am looking at anyway: deterioration of parapets, cracking, loose bricks, loose coping stones, deteriorated mortar joints, spalling or rot. So typical bad things, right, that you don't want happening on your building. The second thing is that everything that's attached to that parapet is also in the report: telecommunications equipment, railings, access rails, ladders, handrail attachments, fire escapes, and signs. They also must be inspected. They're all, if it's on the parapet, it has to be inspected. So first thing I want to get across is this word plumb. So the plumb definition is a weight. This goes back since Roman times and Egyptian, right? They would hold a line, some type of rope or wire with a weight at the bottom of it to figure out a perfect vertical line. And the inspector needs to use a plumb, called a plumb bob, to show that the parapet is not leaning. It's not changing direction. Parapets do that, believe it or not. They actually can lean. So it's basically, it has to be in plumb with 1/8 of its cross-sectional thickness in any location. So typically I use a plumb bob, and this is essentially, I have one of these in my pocket and I carry it around with me pretty much all the time, even though might not be doing an inspection today, I still have it with me. But essentially this is a way to show that the parapet is not leaning. All right, so that's the first thing in that list. The second thing is displacement, cracks, loose bricks, coping stones, and mortar joints. So This is kind of the obvious one too, right? But it's only obvious if you actually are going to your roof and looking at your parapet. Like I said, when a client comes to me and says, I haven't been on my roof in 20 years, I might expect to find something up there, right? Some issues. So cracks, loose bricks, missing bricks, coping stones, moving and shifting, deteriorated mortar joints. So you look for things like this. You look for cracking, you look for movement, you look for issues that happen with all buildings. All right, the parapet takes a lot of abuse. Think about this. A parapet gets wind and rain from the outside, from the top, and also from the back. So it's taking the most abuse of any part of the building, more than the roof even, right? So that's another reason I think this report is important to do no matter what. Third thing is all the equipment and things attached to your railing. So there's a lot of cell phone things on a lot of buildings in Midtown. So this is one that I went to recently. It's cell phone antennas and towers all attached to the parapet. So this is one of those things that's also part of the inspection now. So it's anything attached, handrails, ladders, fire escapes, signs, anything that has to be maintained in a stable condition. Remember, this is about safety, right? So handrails, even though the parapet might be fine, the handrails are now part of this, right? Because they're attached to the parapet. So that's something that has to be inspected. Now, what if there are hazardous or unsafe conditions? So this is where people are actually going to be called out on things. Essentially, the person performing the observation must notify the Department of Buildings. We'll talk about how in a minute. The second thing is, if there are hazardous conditions and if your inspector notifies the Department of Buildings, hopefully they tell you first at least, you must install public protection, essentially sidewalk, shed, fence, netting, whatever it is, and you must remedy that condition within 90 days. Notifying the Department of Buildings. Believe it or not, there's a new email, parapets@buildings.nyc.gov. But to even make it easier, I could also just call 311 and notify the Department of Buildings. At the same time, the client should be putting up protection. So the DOB laid it out as sidewalk, sheds, fences, or netting, anything that's required to secure the safety of the public until that condition is repaired or remedied. And so that is where a sidewalk shed could come into play here. I know the city's been trying to get down sidewalk sheds, but this is a condition on any size building. So you remember local law 11 and FISP is over 6 stories. This could be a 2-story building, 3-story building, a 1-story building, right? It's about keeping the public safe. Okay, so that's why I just wanted to give you kind of a rough idea about what's actually in this report. There are 10 requirements for the report, and the Department of Buildings even said the report should be laid out in this way. These are very basic. Address of the building, name of the owner with contact information, name of the person doing the observation and contact information, dates of the observation, and a location plan. So location plan is the one I want to point out here. So I have done these with aerial images, and I've done these with drawings. So depending on the building, I might do it either way, but this is in red is showing where the parapets are at, and every yellow location is where I've done a plumb bob test. Right, so this is typical. This is how I do it. Everyone's going to do it differently. This is up to the discretion of the inspector how they decide to lay this out, right? Rest of the report, construction of the parapet, material, height, and thickness, general conditions noted, if anything unsafe was found, and actions to remedy the conditions, any repair since the previous report, and then dated photos. So dated photos is the last thing I'm going to talk about. The DOB has a Q&A section on their website about this, and it says photos are not actually required, but the inspector must determine how to best document the results. So in my mind, photos are the easiest way to document things. So I put photos in the report. Every report will have photos, right? It'll have photos in the inside of the parapet and the outside of the parapet. And remember, the owner must maintain these reports for 6 years. because you never know if you're going to get that knock on your door about when is this parapet inspection. I want to see your inspections. I want to see your reports. Okay. So pretty much that's a parapet inspection. Like I said, there are a lot of people out there that will tell you different things, but I'm telling you the actual law. And I know it's weird that you don't need a licensed person to do a parapet inspection, but that's what they've laid out. So remember, it just has to be someone knowledgeable about construction, and it could be your super even. So anyway, that's it. I think we only have an hour. I'm ready for, if you have any questions or anything. Does anyone want to say anything? Michelle?
Yes, if you have any questions, you can feel free to unmute or put them in the chat.
I guess my question is just more about local law 11 and the preponderance of sidewalk sheds that are plaguing the city.
Yes.
Is you say anyone can make a report? I'm not saying that people are maliciously making reports, but it seems to me in my building alone, whoever made a report, the scaffolding goes up first before any follow-up or any further inspection, in months or years before any work takes place. So I'm just expressing frustration, not just about my building, but the entire city. And also, are there any efforts that anyone knows about to review local law 11 and make it every 10 years or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think HTC did a presentation on this. So yes, they are going to be making changes to the FISP report. Essentially, that is still like they hired a firm in the city to do a kind of review of it. There's no rule changes yet, but they will be coming. I think the biggest thing is it's going to be every 5 years might be stretched out even further. But yes, you're right. This kind of goes against the whole getting sidewalk sheds down. If every building if has an unsafe condition at their parapet, even low buildings, that means more sheds, right? But the idea is that this is really meant to have owners kind of self-police themselves, right? To have someone looking at their building, low buildings under 6 stories also, because buildings over 6 stories are going to be inspected every 5 years. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, it could mean more parapets. It could mean more sheds, I mean. Sorry.
Right. Also, I mean, it's just not a question for you. It's just a general question. If a deteriorating situation is seen on one corner of, let's say, a massive ladies' mile department store, taking the entire, how and why does the entire massive department store need to be covered in scaffolding?
That's
If
the local law 11 rule. So yeah, once the building is considered unsafe for even 1 or 2 bricks or a condition that can't be fixed right away, the whole building must have a shed around it. And
well, I'm glad
that's yeah.
HDC or Thornton Tomasetti are looking at this, because elected officials say,
Yeah.
"Oh, we try to get them down." It's like, no, I think we need to look at why they're going up and why our city is the
Yeah.
only city in the world that looks like this.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the Thornton Tomasetti recommendations, it doesn't mean every one is going to be taken by the DOB, but the Department of Buildings is going to finalize their decisions. It's going to be political, I'm sure, and then they'll release them. It's not going to probably be till next year, I think. So no changes this year, essentially. But the idea is changes are happening. Things will change with these rules.
Thank you.
Yep. And I see another question about how much should a building owner expect to pay for a parapet inspection? And I think it depends. Everyone's going to charge different prices. So one of the things that I have seen, if I'm already at a building, I'm not going to charge a lot more to do an inspection because I'm already there. So I'm working on a big handful of buildings myself in my office. But I think every office, if you have an architect or engineer on your building, chances are they can do the parapet inspection for you. And like the dollar, it changes. It depends on, because it's usually hourly. It depends on how much time a person spends at the building and how much time they do on the paper report. I have seen numbers from 600 to 2,000, depending on the side of the building. So I'm just saying what I've heard about other people charging. So it kind of varies. And that's why Another thing is, remember, you don't have to pay a professional to do these reports. Anyone can do these. Your super can do it. Your contractor can do it. So I think that kind of gives you some help, right, when it comes to money, because all this is more money you're going to have to spend. So it's about finding ways to cut the budget, right? I think everyone's concerned about money nowadays. So often there are curbs at the roof edge as a base for guardrails. Yes. So any height parapet, like I showed in image 1 that was 7 inches, that is a parapet. The reason it's a parapet is that the exterior wall rises 7 inches past the roof line. And then there's a 4-foot railing on top. But yes, that is what I call a stub parapet. So that would be included too. Yes, the format for the report. So the format for the report is the things that I went through earlier. There's 10 items essentially. There's not a lot. It basically is they tell you these 10 things. They say address, and the DOB even said laid out in this format with these 10 things. So the address of the building, address of the owner, name of the person and contact information inspecting, dates, location plan, construction of the parapet, sizes and heights, conditions noted, any repairs previous, and dated photos. Essentially, that is the report. So that is your template, essentially. That's the format. Now, how people lay this out, I don't know. They made it pretty easy and said, these points are what are required, essentially. And the last one is the owners maintain these for 6 years. Anything to look out for when inspecting a building where steel braces have been installed on the interior side? Yeah, so a lot of tall, skinny parapets throughout the city have had structural reinforcement essentially installed. It's just so the parapet, the rules are the same. It doesn't matter what the construction is. You're looking for those things that I brought up, those three items. You're looking for a determination if it's unplumbed or not, a determination if there's any kinds of issues like cracks, loose bricks, mortar joints, and then anything that's attached to that parapet. So it's pretty much the same, no matter what extra things have been installed as reinforcement. Does that answer that question?
And the question, will the presentation be online? This has all been recorded, so you can go back and watch the whole video with the presentation in it.
And so, yeah, and yeah, I think the biggest thing, this is a really simple report to do. I think one of the confusing thing is who's allowed to do it and what does it actually mean? It's not submitted to anybody. It's just submitted to the client or the owner of the building.
So, hello,
Yes.
Joe Campo here. I live and I'm part owner of a loft building, which is 5 stories. So it's within 6, but then who the hell knows? Because there are all these different rules and regulations. And we're up and down to the roof all the time. I've not seen anything wrong there. My husband was in construction. He's very careful about looking at everything. We've had the roof replaced some years ago. And so if he or my friend who's an architectural historian has worked on many buildings in the city goes up and makes a report, this is sufficient.
Absolutely. Yes.
With question, okay.
The parapet walls do not face
My
the
husband.
sidewalk. They do
So,
not. They do
yeah,
not.
so that's up to the discretion of the inspector if they want to inspect those. But as far as the rules are, it's only about anything over the public right of way.
Exactly.
Right.
And our parapet wall, our front cornice does not attach in any way to a parapet wall.
Mm-hmm.
And
That would be exempt. Yep.
And the back of the building is just hand railing.
Yes. That's why a lot of brownstones and townhouses don't even have parapets. It's usually the ends of the rows. If you have a long row, like a block long row of townhouses or brownstones, it's usually the ends that will have some type of thing, some type of parapet. But that's why I was saying, just be on the lookout. There's those flyers from random companies went up pretty much everywhere. They blanketed Brooklyn and Queens, right? And so there's a lot of fear out there about what this actually means. And I just wanted to get across that not everyone has a parapet. And that's why I kind of started at the very basics of what a parapet is.
Exactly.
Right.
I would, you know, it's fine with me. I would keep a log, but I don't really see the point in it. The parapet walls are brand new. And the building it's an old building, but the parapet walls and the whole top floor has been repaired several years ago. So,
1879
yeah,
is my building. Very
18
thick walls.
1879,
very
24-inch walls.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's it. Is there any other, Michelle? I think that's it.
That's all I see. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, I don't believe so. Again, this has been recorded. Please do check out our YouTube channel. We have a lot on there. And check out our website for any other upcoming programming. Thank you so much, Matthew. This was fantastic.
Right.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.